Clint, I'm going to start off with a mental exercise, a little thought experiment. I want you to imagine you're at the ripe old age of 99 years old and you are laying on your deathbed. And you're looking back over the life that you've led, over the experiences that you've had. What kind of a life are you hoping to look back on, and what kind of a legacy are you hoping to leave behind?
Wow. So if I look at that, my boys are older now, so they're 16 next month. They both have their birthdays, so they'll turn 16 and 13. So I want to have some really good years with them before they're done school. So one of the things that jumps out at me is I said with quitting working for others and starting to work for myself that I would make it to all the key events in their lives. So that will be big. I'll have done that. I'll have been to their key events in high school. If they're doing fun things in college, you'll be able to go watch. And then as they age, I'll have that relationship with them that transitions from their father to a trusted person who they can talk to, who they can call up when they're having challenges in life and talk them through that, through relationships, hopefully family, to be that grandfather, to have built that dream home on the water that they're coming to for Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas dinners, and we're all getting back together and we're present and we're mindful and we're still attached and we still love each other. And to have built a thriving business with my partners where we still have fun going into the shop. I picture Charlie and Warren and they're in their 90s and they're going to work and talking together and passing the torch to the younger generation. So there will be a lot of that. It will be that combination of all have built a thriving business, all have grown people in the business, outside the business, mentorship relationships, teaching opportunities. And I always say to continue to write and speak in a way that helps up to, the goal is 1 billion people who I can help grow personally, professionally, and financially. So whether that's through the work we do, through the business we have, or through the writing, the podcasting, the YouTube videos that we're going to start doing, just touching as many people in the world with simple messages. That's a big thing I believe in, Nick, is that so much of our lives can be simplified and that there is a simple path to achieve what we want at almost everything. And just recognizing for people that simple doesn't mean easy and laying out the simple path and then helping people achieve it. That'll be the big part of the next 40 years, 50 years.
Wow, man, I love so much about your answer. That you said that part of your mission is to reach a lot of people, billion people, and send the message that the what's really important is simple, but simple doesn't necessarily mean easy.
Mhm.
And you seem to take your own advice because the first place you went on this question of looking back over your life and being proud of the life you led is very simple. It's that you have a good relationship with your sons and that you were there for the important events and that you still have a relationship as they grow and mature and start their own families and have their own kids. And another, you had uh, this very particular image of having the dream home on the water and meeting for Thanksgiving. Like I felt that, dude. I got goosebumps as you said
Yeah.
that because it's a very clear and simple. Things can become so abstract and ethereal when we think about our dreams or what's important to us and our values. And this is something that's great about writing, which I know we're going to get into. Writing is about getting down to the core of,
That's right.
you know, of delivering a message, of painting a picture, of telling a story. And the
Yeah.
fact I can tell that you've done a shitload of writing, not just because I've looked at your timeline, but just from this little example of hearing you speak, that you've done the work to be able to get down to the core of what your mission is in this lifetime. And that rang through in your answer. And I really love that.
Yeah, and I didn't even hit on there'll definitely be a deepening of my meditation practice of obviously if I'm living into my 90s, I've done something right from a physical fitness perspective, but just really focusing in on mental and physical personal growth, spiritual growth. It's all going to be part of the equation, so that's going to be fun. When it comes to that image of the house, I've often found I call it the law of attraction, but then you capitalize the action at the end of attraction because
Love it.
too many people stop at manifesting. I look at it and say, yeah, manifestation is important. I need to have a clear vision of what I'm going to achieve. And, we've sold the house I'm in now. So I'm in the backyard in my man cave, I've got a gym, my recording studio, beautiful home. Never thought I would own this, but I started designing it in my mind before we built it. We designed it and built it with a builder. And it's one of those things where when I start to picture the next one, I start to say, okay, what are some of the features, right? What's it going to look like in the front? What's the back going to look like? What's the yard going to be? How's it going to interface with the water? What cities are going to be in? And the more I can crystallize it, the more I can make it real in my mind, then I go out and do the work. Then I go out and make that reality happen. And as I'm working and as we're building the net worth, all of a sudden you're looking at Zillow, our version of Zillow. You look at Zillow and you see that house and you're like, shit, that's the exact spot. Like that's what I've been drawing for years in my mind. And that happens because you've trained yourself to look for it.
Yeah.
It's I joked with Barrett. I don't know if you saw Barrett O'Neill had the post about the tragic event. Luckily, no one was seriously hurt, but his family was in an accident, and he was very thankful they were in a Jeep Wagoneer, very big vehicle. I don't remember ever seeing a Wagoneer. Now I see one almost every day, and I'm like,
Yep.
oh, there's the Wagoneer. Barrett painted such a visible story that now I just see them everywhere. So I want to paint that story of how am I going to live my life? How am I going to spend time with my family? How am I going to spend time with my friends? What's the house I'm going to live in? The more I can paint it, then I can just go do it.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's having something to aim at, right? And the
Yes.
clearer that vision is of what you're aimed at, then you can recognize it. But
Yeah,
if you don't even in your analogy, if you don't even know what a Wagoneer looks like, they're going to be passing you by all the time and you're not going to recognize it, right? So if you
100%.
have that image of what the home is, right? This physical thing, you'll recognize it as soon as it comes on your radar. And then if you have something that's a little more again ethereal, of a good relationship with your family. But if you do meditate on that, I would love to ask if you journal. Journaling is a big part of my life too. If you write it out and you work it out down to the core of what does a good relationship with my kids, with my family look like, then you can recognize it when it's there instead of sort of aimlessly in the dark poking and hoping that it arrives. Like you have that clear vision. Is journal? I know you write like a madman. How often do you write just for yourself? Like I like to call journaling a conversation with myself on the page. Do you ever write to sort of clarify your own thinking?
Yeah, 100%. I haven't been doing it as much lately because I've been out of the office, but what I often do is I have a notebook with me, a moleskin
Hmm.
or something the equivalent.
Classic.
The paper quality's gone downhill, so I'm trying other brands, but they all
Okay.
suck right now. So if you're listening to this and you come out with a page that we can actually write on that the ink doesn't go through, we'll probably all start using your journal. So the what I'll do is from the front to the back is like work. Like, oh, hey, here's what I got to do today. But then I'll often start at the back and go to the front, and that'll be like my personal space. And I'll just do simple things. Like something will strike me where I'll say, hey, here's how I want to design my ideal day. What does an ideal day look like? If I were a Sims character, how would I design my day? Or how can I help my son achieve his goals with football? If he wants to play college football, how much does he need to weigh? How are we going to get him there? What does his diet need to look like? What is it, how can he work with a coach? Like, what do we need to do day in, day out to get him where he wants to be? How can I help my youngest with school? What are the things I can do? And I just try to write ideas and thinking. It doesn't mean I always go and exactly do what I write. But
Yep.
the more to your point, the more I do it, regardless of what area, and I may never go back and look at it. Quite often, I never look at anything I write down. But the idea of writing it down is planting a bit of a seed to do it, to think
Yep.
about it. And so the same with my annual goal setting. I create like a big complex, not too complex, but a plan. Like, here's what's going to happen this year. And I've gotten to the point where I take that annual goal setting and kind of break it down to, if I do these things daily, I'm going to get there at the end of the year.
Yes.
And I almost never look at it again. But sometimes I may even set goals that are, 10 years out. And then I don't think about them for a year or two or three. And then I look at the sheet and I'm like, holy shit, like I'm 80% done that goal. And so I don't do it religiously. I don't do it in a defined way always. And I'm a big believer that when you write it, you do it.
Yeah, I completely agree. What I love about your technique is you are very action focused, and there's an equation there, right? So there's people that quote only take action and never plan or never break things down into systems, and you waste a lot of energy, right? And I think a lot of people, particularly those that are spending a lot of time on social media, are way over planning. They
Oh,
have every
100%.
they have
100%.
every step of the system towards their goal completely planned out, but they're
Yeah.
not taking action. And it sounds like you've struck a really good balance, that sort of forward center of mass where it's about, okay, this is what the goal is, these are the steps towards it, and I'm going to kind of forget about that, like let that, this is, I do a very similar thing, let that sort of work in my subconscious, like let that work out
Yes.
over time, right?
Yes.
And let me go out and actually do it. And the other part of that too is you're going to learn so much more by doing
That's
instead
right.
of an
That's right.
analysis by paralysis. Have a
Yeah.
direction you're headed towards, and then start taking action and learn from the feedback of the results of those actions.
Like, often, if you show me someone's Notion template, right? I mean, fuck, if they're using Notion
Mhm.
right there, they're probably a mental masturbator.
I
Like, just
agree.
right off the get, like, oh, you use Notion every day? Yeah, you mentally masturbate way too fucking much. Like,
I
just
totally agree, bro.
guaranteed, guaranteed.
Yeah,
Anyone who's listening, we can debate this to the earth's end, but you'd be way better off just taking some fucking action.
completely
And
agree.
and so sorry if we're not allowed to swear on the podcast. We'll
We
have to
can
beat those
you
out.
can you
Okay.
can say fuck it as much as you want, buddy.
Right? Like, because and I love you to pieces, my friend Curtis, who's probably gonna hear this. Curtis Handy on Twitter may inadvertently hear it when people hear him calling about for this. I see what this guy has done in Notion, and I get almost anxiety at the amount of timing, planning, and effort that's gone into it. I'm like, holy
Mhm.
shit. Like, that feels like you've built a business. You've spent enough time
Yeah.
on your Notion that you could have built a business or two, and you could be making a lot of money. But you built this masterful work of art of a Notion spreadsheet. And I'm super proud of it for you. And I love what you've done. But how much of that time could have been actually working? And I think about that for a lot of people. Like my son asked me in the car once. He always ignores the advice I give him, Nick. And his basketball academy had just brought in a guy who trained NBA players, and he was talking to them all about goal setting and planning, and like everything I told my son, right? So we're in the car on the ride home, and he's kind of sheepish. He's telling me what the guy told him, and he's like, I know, this is like everything you told me. And he's like, hey, like, what's the best productivity app? And I'm like, best productivity app is just doing what you're supposed to fucking do, son.
Yeah.
Don't like it's
I
not
like
an
to
app on
say,
your phone. It's not a book. It's not a
yeah,
spreadsheet. Write down 5 things you need to do and go do them.
I like
Right?
to say
Like,
the best productivity hack is do not disturb. Turn the
yeah,
phone off and get to
put your
work.
phone in a drawer and get to work.
Yeah.
Like I can tell you if you want to make if you want to be a starter on the football team, here's the 5 things you need to do. I can
Mhm.
write those 5 things out for you, and we can store them wherever you want. But none of the tools we're going to use matter, son, if you
Yeah.
don't do those 5 things every single day. And that's where
Yeah.
people get lost, right? Every single day.
Yeah.
And we were joking in advance. We were chatting about like, holy shit, you're an OG. You've been podcasting since 2018, and you're like, yeah, but every once in a while, like I took a year and a half off. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa,
Yes.
whoa, whoa. Because consistency, nothing in the world is as powerful as consistency.
Completely agree, man. No, yeah, I see your quote there. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is not an act, but a habit. One of my favorite quotes. And it's funny, I did start off with the fact that I've been very inconsistent with the podcast. But I am sort of known on my small little group on Twitter as the super consistent guy because I've posted
Yeah,
every day since I've started.
and
I've
it
posted, I've,
matters.
yeah, I've released a newsletter for almost 2.5 years, haven't missed a week, and so I'm very consistent with the writing. That's
Good.
sort of my North Star is the writing. And the podcast is sort of a fun thing to do stuff like this, to meet really cool, interesting people like yourself and have a good conversation. But yeah, I think whatever you choose to master, if it's basketball, football, if it's writing, if it's podcasting, that's the thing you have to do every single day. Like you said, it's
Yeah,
the
without
boring
fail,
basics.
without fail.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you even have to learn, and I'm debating this one right now. I'm trying to think of it because I love doing all these things, right? Is I've got the podcast and I'm bringing back conversations with guests. I took a little bit of a break recently because I just reading a book every week was getting hard while trying to launch some businesses, quit a job, sell a house, buy a new house. I was just feeling overwhelmed. So that's coming back online, and I feel really good about it because I've got some guests lined up that I'm really excited to talk to. The and I'm looking at it. I've got the newsletter that goes out every week for the last year and a bit
Oh yeah.
to, we've got 25,000 people now. But I'm kind of
Awesome.
looking at it and saying, because I'm thinking about what you're thinking, what you're saying is in which of these areas do I want to be the best?
Yeah.
Do I want to dominate? And I love writing the newsletter. I really enjoy it. But if there's anything I really, really loved, it was having conversations on the podcast, right? I started the newsletter because everyone's like, you should have a newsletter. I'm like, okay, you need to own your own list. Okay, I guess I'll go on my own list. Um, and I do like it, but that burning passion and fire, it's not the same as having a conversation with someone like eye to eye. And, I
Oh
can't
yeah.
imagine how much better it'd be just doing it in person. So part of what I've got to think about over the next 2 to 3 months is like, what does an ideal world look like? And the
Yeah.
ideal world may not involve a newsletter. It may involve, or it may, and I just got to think about how do I do it all? How do I grow a business, build a social media brand, write a newsletter, and host a podcast? Like, how do I do it all? How do I do those 4 or 5 things? And that, when you said you're in your 90s and you're looking back, I didn't mention a newsletter. I didn't mention a podcast, but I
Yes.
said I want to help a billion people. Okay, well, what's the path? And so that,
Yeah.
Nick, you're really planting a little seed that I've got to think that through.
I love it, dude. So I also, speaking of consistency, I host the weekly space on X, and we just did
Yes.
our 42nd week in a row yesterday,
Yeah.
coming up on a year straight. And it's called WTF. This is the first time I've actually talked about it in this podcast. WTF, Writers Therapy Family, which
Nice. You were
WTF
on
is
last
awesome.
night, right?
I was, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I have a little cohort of people that show up every single week, and it's called Writers Therapy Family. We really are like a family. We talk about writing, but we also just talk about life, everything that people are going through, like
Beautiful.
real stuff, health stuff, family stuff, tragedies, the whole deal. People get emotional on there often, and I joke that I'm not a therapist, but I play one on X. I
Nice.
really I really try to be there for people and to work stuff through. So this is, you're talking about things that fire you up. So it fires me up to to hear from you that this is making you rethink, like what is the North Star, where is your energy pulling you, and like what is the ideal world, because this is something I've talked about a little bit here, and I've posted about a little bit. My ideal, this is like not a very clear, this isn't like your home on the water and the kids showing up for Thanksgiving. This is ethereal. But what I want is to make a living writing and having conversations like this,
Yeah.
podcasting.
Yeah.
Like that's my ideal world. Is I'm going to I wake up very early in the morning, 5 a.m. I want to write for an hour, and I want to write about whatever the hell I want to write about. I don't want to do productivity hacks. I don't want to regurgitate other people's stuff. I want to write about like really what is calling me in my soul. I'm a big Joseph Campbell kind of guy. Follow
Mhm.
your bliss, follow your callings. And then I just want to talk to, I want to have the leverage to be able to talk to anyone in the world. Joe Rogan, Elon
Totally.
Musk,
Totally.
that's the dream. Now, there's a lot of steps before that that I haven't
Hmm.
figured out yet, but I wanted to share that with you to sort of flip the question back on you. Like, in a perfect world, a question I one of my coaches asks me often, I don't think it originates with him, but what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? So imagining that ideal outcome. And if you knew you couldn't fail, you know it's going to take some work, it's going to take sacrifice, it's going to take dedication. But if you knew you couldn't fail, where would Clint end up?
Yeah, and it's for sure the podcast, right? And it's I love self-development. I love self-growth, mindfulness, spirituality, finance, physical. I love it all. So that's an arena where if there's a bestseller or there's a new book coming out with a great new idea, I want to talk. I want the author to say, yeah, like I want to talk to Clint. That's the conversation I have to have.
Yeah.
He, for multiple reasons. One, like the energy and the joy and the knowledge that I'll get by reading their books and having that conversation, massive. So that's one.
Mm-hmm.
Two, I want to be able to make it so that that author has an avenue to get their material out and grow and prosper and write a book and,
Yeah.
move up the charts. Love it. Three is to be able to take the information from them and have that conversation where I can get across to my audience what I thought were the most important parts of their book. Then in an hour-long drive, you can listen to that conversation and be like, oh, I've got some good ideas on how to fix my sleep. I've got some good ideas on how to adjust my diet. And then if I can take that information and turn it into a good article, a good conversation in my writing, that works for social media and for a newsletter. Like, hey, here's some things I took away from my conversation this week. Here's how I'm applying it in my life. Right. So what would an ideal world look like? I get up, I have a great workout, drop my kids off at school, and then I have, half a day is dedicated to the business and getting done what we need to get done. And 2 or 3 hours is devoted to the writing, the content creation, the podcast, the newsletter, and ultimately recognizing that they all also tie together.
Yeah.
So if I'm working on self-development and I'm becoming a better person, then my business necessarily ought to become better as I become a better boss, a better leader, a better colleague, a better peer, right?
Yeah.
So the better I can become, the more I can share that with the people on our team, the more they can grow. I've always said if you can help the people around you on your team grow personally, professionally, and financially, they're never going to want to leave. So if I continue to evolve, I'm going to be able to share that with the people on the team. The company will grow, the company will develop. It the business I'm starting is real estate development. So you're looking at it and saying, well, how does that all pair together? And that's part of what I've got to figure out, right?
Hmm.
How does my real estate development business pair with my podcast and my newsletter?
Yeah.
And that's what I have to put together. That's the piece that I've got to bridge.
Yeah, and again, I'm live here in the Bay Area. I'm kind of a hippie guy, right? So I'm big on energy. And what I've heard from you so far, the most energy is in the podcast and everything that goes around with that. The uh, Gaining the information from having these high quality conversations with these people that have dedicated their life to specialize, in a certain area of skill or knowledge. And that's where I see you being the most fired up, is talking
For
about
sure.
that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the peak of the mountain, peak of the triangle, and everything sort of has to funnel up to that.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
don't, I'm not going to give you business or personal branding advice on any of that, but I just wanted to point that out. Is like, I'm sitting here listening to your voice, watching your face, and that's where the energy is, man. So any
Yeah, it's
way that
100%.
everything can support these high quality conversations. Something
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up. I don't know if you've heard the term before, ancient Greek term dialogos.
No.
Okay, this is something I've brought up almost every episode so far. Dialogos is the wisdom that can only be achieved through conversation. And
Mm.
it's, again, kind of this energy that happens when two people get together to have a conversation. There's sort of this third rogue thing that sort of has a life of its own, has an identity of its own. And if you want to put a name on it, it's dialogos. And part of the reason that I can't get away from this podcast, I keep coming back to it no matter how busy I am, no matter how much time I take off, is I'm sort of addicted to that dialogos energy. I love
Yes.
I love that third rogue entity that appears when two people are kind of digging into a certain idea, or digging into their own personal journey, and you can see the parallels in your journey as somebody's exploring that. And I wanted to just pose that to you. Have you felt that dialogos in any of the conversations you've had recently on your podcast?
I think a lot of them, I mean, it's hard because you're preparing for it, right? You're doing the research. For me, a lot of the research and what I like, and it may evolve over time as I have different conversations, but for now, it's been about that book, what's being released,
Hmm.
not the past, not their life, but the book. And this may evolve, but right now that's it. And I have that conversation and just seeing that light in their eyes when they're like, oh, fuck, like you actually read my book. And some of them say that. They're like, oh, like most podcasts I go on, like they haven't read what I wrote. Like it's clear you have.
Yeah.
And hearing someone like having a conversation with Brad Stulberg is an example, who's been on a couple times and for the practice of groundedness and master of change. The having him say, like is this what you want to do? Because like I can see a joy in you when we're talking, and I've been on a lot of podcasts, and in the way you do this, you're up there with some of these people, and he'll name some people, and I'm like, oh, like shit. Like those are those are people that I look up to in podcasting. So for him to say that, like it hits home, it brings an energy. But it's how do you have it? And you've got the point. Like, how do you have enough gas in the tank to deliver that every time? Because if you don't deliver it, it comes across to the audience, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you're not coming with that energy, if you're not coming with that joy, and Sean Purry talked about this the other day. He was on David Perel's podcast, and then
Mhm.
they repeated that on the my first million podcast. And so I'm trying this out. Is this idea of state change before you
Mhm.
record? So before you and
Mhm.
I recorded, I had a quick nap. I had a long day, and I came into my studio. I grabbed the curl bar. I did a set of curls. I did some slam balls, a little Superman pose. And then I'm
Mhm.
like, all right, like I got a pump. I'm like, oh, the blood's going, I'm breathing a little hard. Like I'm gonna jump on this podcast and I'm gonna bring Nick some energy. Like I'm
Feel
not
it,
gonna
man.
come on and be flat, be monotone. Like I'm gonna come and I'm gonna bring the gas and like we're gonna have a good conversation. And so doing that for my own show, doing
Hmm.
that when I record, I'm going to start Nick, like you're like, wait, you just said like you got so many things, like maybe you should cut things, but I'm like, I'm gonna start adding a thing. Is this idea of like, and it's your idea of journaling. We were talking about this with colleagues that we were out for drinks. This idea of, I mean, it's not a new idea, it's an old idea. I've just never done it. It's vlogging, right? Is
Hmm.
just like you see me now, just at the end of the night, coming out to my office, plopping myself in this chair every day, just looking into this camera, just 5 minutes. Right? Like, what did I learn today? What what's something I thought of that's like a diary to my son?
Mm.
Diary of a dad. Like, what's a nugget? What's a 5 minute nugget that I can just drop that kid? That if he sees it someday and I'm dead, like my son watches these 5 minute nuggets and he's like, fuck, every night for a decade, my dad dropped me a 5 minute nugget. And the more I think about it, that's what it's going to be is like, what's a five? And obviously, if it's my son and I'm speaking to him, I've got two, so my sons, if I'm speaking to them, then someone else who's listening can benefit from it. And I just drop a 5 minute, not heavily edited, drop it in the Riverside, auto caption it, upload, no third party editing or B roll, just diary of a dad, 5 minute drop to my son. And then I go to my room. So that's something I want to start as soon as, the more I think about it, like I want to start it tomorrow night.
But bro, I don't know if you can see me getting a little emotional as you were sharing that. This is my mission. This is why I started creating in the first place. So I have two daughters,
Yes.
10 and 7 years old. Uh,
You
my
look so
story.
young though.
Everybody says that. I still get carded. I'm 34.
Okay.
Had my first daughter at 24. So getting back to Joseph Campbell and callings, I had a calling to write when I was very young. Um, I'm not going to bore you with my story, especially not the listeners, because I tell it all the time. But I grew up in a cult. I was homeschooled, and I was very neglected academically. So
Mm,
I basically taught myself to read and write, and it meant that I fell way behind. So when I was 16 years old, I had a third grade spelling level. And I had decided before that, when I was 12, I'm going to grow up and be a famous author. I'm going to write fantasy. I fell in love with J.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, all that kind of stuff. Yes. And I started writing my own version of, created my own world, did all the maps, the whole deal. And I'm going to grow up and be a famous writer. And then I had the wake up call that, hey, dude, you have a third grade spelling level. And I actually got a tutor and worked my ass off. So by the time I graduated high school, I was at 12th grade spelling level. And I was planning to be a teacher. I ended up getting into construction, very different route.
nice.
And so, yes, and I'm an electrical engineer today. And so I stopped writing basically. I wrote some work emails, didn't journal, nothing. I didn't write for almost a decade. And the thing that brought me back to writing is the exact sentiment that you just said about those 5 minute golden nuggets to leave behind for your sons is when my ex-wife was pregnant with my daughter over 10 years ago. I had this message which came from the divine, from higher power, that said, you're going to have to write to your daughter. I've always been very aware of my mortality and the fact that life could end at any point.
Hmm.
And I do this sort of deathbed meditation, what I took you through, being 99 years old. I do it like today. I imagine I'm going to sleep tonight and it's over. And the reason I do that is to see what regrets come up for me. Like if it were to end today, what am I going to regret having put
Yeah.
off? Right. And it all sort of reached a head when I was about 31, 32, where I said, it's writing, man. Every time I do this exercise, I know that I need to write something to leave it behind for my daughters. Not only is it a calling for me, is it a passion for me, but do it for your kids, right? And I had every excuse in the world. I work 50 to 70 hours a week, a stressful job, being a father on top of all of that. There's not a lot of free time, but I started waking up an hour early every single morning and just writing as like a sacrament, as a habit to know that if I were to pass away early, I have something left behind for my daughters. That evolved
Beautiful.
in Thank you, man. That evolved into a newsletter, evolved into writing on the timeline on X. And I actually just so that I know my listeners have heard the story before. I had a near death experience about a year and a half ago where I got jumped and looked at a gun pointed in my face. And so I had a real life experience of the thought experiment I had done of, hey, it's going to end tonight. I really thought it was going to end in that moment. And what came to mind was, hey, man, you did it. I had like 40 articles written online. I had a bunch of private Google Docs that I had given my friends the password to of, hey, make sure my daughters see these. And it gave me peace when what I thought could have been, my last moment. And the fact that I survived that night, I said, well, there's your answer, man. You know that life is precious, it's temporary, it could be taken away at any point. And I remind myself that every single day when I sit down to write. And I just could not encourage you more to do those little 5-minute
Yeah,
vlogs
yeah.
to your sons
The
because
oh, what about your fantasy book? Like, where's that at?
that's long gone, man. I don't even write fiction. I'm a
The
nonfiction guy at this point. I know
so
you're a bit of a fiction writer though.
well, I've wrote a fantasy book. So
Oh,
I
right on.
with my sister. So a little over 10 years ago, I had an idea. I was like, I probably read 400 or 500 fantasy books, and I had an idea for my own world and continued to think and learn. And my sister's just a master with words. Like I'm very, short, tight, punchy. That's why it works for
Mhm.
Twitter, right?
Yeah.
But she's just got this way that she turns words into poetry. So we work together where I write the ideas and I'll send her the chapter, and then she spins it into like art, and
Nice.
we joked when
What a
we
what a
first
great
started.
team.
Oh, like it's
Yeah.
phenomenal. And it's just an enjoyable experience. And when we first started, I think I said, like she was trying to say, hey, we're 50-50. And I was like, are you kidding? Like, you're my glorified editor. Like 75-25, right? Like, whatever. And then as like the more I read her words, I was like, eventually I was like, yeah, we're 50-50. Like,
Yeah.
you are
Yeah.
just so good at what you do. And, we've fallen off. We finished it during COVID. We wrote more during COVID when they kind of forced that work from home because it just
Mm,
created time, right? For
of
all of
course.
us. The
Yeah.
world slowed down. And we wrote more in that one year than we had in the 9 years and then you realize, oh, now you got to find an agent. Okay, that's just as
Mhm.
hard as writing the book. And so
Yeah.
and then we got to that stage right when I started the podcast and the Twitter journey, and I've been unfair to her in that I haven't gone back to resurrect that. I've been so focused on growing on Twitter, growing
Mhm.
the social media brand while building the business while being a dad that I've neglected getting it published. One of the biggest things, Nick, was, my mom reading it, my dad reading it, my
Oh,
uncle, like my brother, and just like my dad's read maybe 3 books in his life. And, the Bible, like a book when he was a kid, and this book. And
that's
he was
beautiful.
like, that's all that mattered, right?
Yeah.
Like it
Yeah.
was, when Tim Ferriss talks about if you're going to do a project, doing the project is the joy. Like it is the
Yeah.
win. That
Yeah.
way, if you don't sell a single copy, you're happy. And
You
my
won.
dad reading that and seeing that my sister and I had finished a book, like, and him reading it was like enough. It was like, it's amazing. But now that's got to get published. So it's on the to-do list. Now we have a VA on the team. Got to work with her and my wife to like get an agent.
Bro, that's beautiful. First off, I have to say I'm so embarrassed because I knew that you wrote that book because I heard you talking to Greg Ludd about it
Yeah, it's
on
crazy,
his
right? It's
podcast.
crazy.
And I don't know how. I know that you wrote fantasy, but I couldn't remember the whole story of whether or not you had published it or not.
Yeah, book
And
one.
Greg's gonna kick my ass that I flopped that
Greg
question.
rocks. He's
Greg's the cool.
he's phenomenal. Yeah.
He's been on the podcast a couple episodes ago, and he's my buddy. Speaking of, I did DM him, and he wants me to ask you a question on one of your tweets.
Yeah, let's
So
do it.
yeah, I'm gonna
Fuck.
bring up.
It's gonna be like
Uh,
a gotcha. Greg.
no, this really makes me think a lot. So this was
Okay.
one of your tweets. This was back in May 14th. Um, what is one statement that defines your personality that difference you from the average person? I'll go first. It's never
Huh.
just a game.
Never just a game. Yeah, it's just the way life is. Like there's nothing like to me, this goes back to what we talked about. Like I'm just wired for action. I'm wired to go. I'm wired to win. And like I can't just be passive. I can't just do it for fun. Like doing it for fun is not fun. Doing it to win is fun. And I'm 98% certain I got this from my father. Growing up, he wouldn't play games with us at all, nothing. And then when he was older, like I'm in my 30s, late 30s, I've got older, I've got my two boys and I'm talking to him and he's like, you know why I never played with you guys when you were young? And I'm like, why? He's like, I can't handle losing. And
That's very
he's
honest.
just
Very
basically
honest.
saying like it wouldn't have been fun. But it's, I've heard people say that, and I always say this. I'm like, well, that's a losing mentality. That's a loser mentality because I can't fucking handle losing either, but I just don't lose, right? I play and I play
Yeah.
to win. And if you lose when you play to win, you win,
Yeah.
right? Like
No, it's very
it's
zen, dude. It goes right back to what you were saying about the Tim Ferriss thing. Even if you lose, how can you still win?
Yeah, because
Right?
you
It's yes,
battled. Like if
yes,
you and I are doing something and we're playing a game of pickup basketball, right? Like imagine we're both good at basketball. I don't know if you are, I'm not.
not that
But
great. I can
we're
dribble, but
right. We're like or we play a sport where we're both good at, like hockey, and like we both give it our all. And like you're sweating, maybe there's a little blood. Like you battled and you lost. I will take that all day, every day, over I won over someone who wasn't competitive. Like I
yeah,
would never in my life want to play a game where I'm punching down. Like
yeah,
I want to always be in the arena with people who are better than me to force me to be the best I possibly can. And I'm going to beat them. And if I don't, I'm better tomorrow than I was today. Right? And that is why it's never just a game because it's
mm,
always about forward movement, forward progress, forward, forward, forward. Right? I think Rick
yeah,
Tocchet, one of the lines he used with the Canucks that I heard that embodies that is he said force beats force. You know how we always
mm,
hear, when two objects collide,
yeah.
that's how they stop because force it stops. But his point is like, no,
Keep
force
going.
beats force because our force doesn't stop. And you
Mm,
just saw that in the way they played this year. And I'm like,
yeah,
that's how I coach 10, 11, and 12-year olds to play hockey
mm,
is you're a relentless wave, boys. Every line that comes on is a wave crashing against our opponent. And the first wave, like, you're at the beach and the first wave hits you and you're like, oh, it's a wave. And the second wave hits you and you get a little jittery. And the third wave hits you and you're like, oh, maybe I should go to shore. And then it just keeps hitting you and you're like, oh, this water is choppy, right? That's how I teach 10-year-olds how to play hockey
I love
is
it.
just relentless forward momentum. So that's the answer, Craig. It's never just a game.
Bro. I'm ready to go like take over the world, bro.
That's
I got an ice rink right across the street. I've never played
oh,
hockey, but
Nick.
I want to go be
Oh,
a relentless force, man.
the
I
Oakland
want to
Mighty
start
Ducks.
crashing some waves, dude. I love
Oh,
it, dude. Man, those ball slams and Superman's ahead of the podcast really
you got to do
really
them.
got you fired
It's
up.
going to be permanent now.
I was laughing about the fact that I made you ohm afterwards. I probably calmed you down too.
Well,
So
the I don't talk about this much, but I did do a 2-year mindfulness meditation teacher certification course during COVID.
oh
So
wow.
when you said, "Have you, do you own?" It's like, yeah, I've been known to throw an ohm out here and there. I think I have my own bowl right behind us,
Hell yeah.
up on the
I
shelf there.
love that. I
Yeah,
love it, man. I have to mention because it's one of my favorite topics, and you were right on it. You're familiar with Ryan Holiday, the writer
yeah, for
on
sure, for sure.
Stoicism? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got
Well,
on here on my arm. I don't know how I can show the camera. Here, let me see if I can do this. This symbol is skull and flames. So when you were talking about the death exercise you do, I've got tattooed on my forearm the idea of amor fati and memento
Amor
mori.
fati.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I
yeah, I
just
like
because
Ryan.
I told you my near death experience story, I got to tell you this because I think you'll love it.
Roll.
Um, when I got jumped, I had my car keys, my wallet, and my phone in my pockets. And there was three guys. One of them picked me up, and the guy who had the gun on me reached in my pockets and grabbed all my stuff as the other guy was bear hugging me. And when he put me down, they pistol whipped me, beat me up. I was bloody and bruised, and they ran off because some cop car came by. I ran after the cop car and got their attention. And I reached in my pocket and I realized there was one thing they hadn't taken from me. Now, this is one of those life imitating art type things. I wouldn't believe it if I didn't experience it myself. The one item I still had in my pocket was my Amor Fati coin, which I bought from Ryan Holiday's
Nice.
website. Daily
Yeah.
Stoic.
Yeah. Celebrate your faith, baby boy. Like you're like, fuck you, Ryan. Fuck you.
And
I
I
don't know
actually,
how I'm gonna celebrate this one.
yeah. So I had to throw that out there. But yeah, getting
Love
back to
it.
Ryan Holiday, you were talking about how you coach your hockey team, how you approach life in general. Of even if you always want your opponent to be stronger than you, and your victory is, even if you quote lose, your victory is knowing that you did your best. You left it all out on the field. You left it all on the court. Ryan will often talk about the inner scorecard versus the external
100%.
scorecard.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what it is, right? If you get to decide your own inner scorecard, you
Yeah.
get to decide what a victory is, not the
Yeah.
scoreboard, not anybody else. And I think that you really capture that in a beautiful, inspiring way of like, hey, what is my inner scorecard? I'm gonna keep forcing forward. I'm gonna keep crashing wave after wave after wave. And I may not be the most talented, the fastest, the smartest, but I'm not gonna quit.
That's
And
right. Yeah.
that's how you're in the end, you can feel good about your own inner scorecard is I didn't give up. I knew I gave it everything that I got.
So you caught this quote behind me, but you just quoted. So if right over here on the wall is the man in the arena,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And
Yep.
you know that one, right? It's not the critic
Mhm.
who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs. Like you got in the arena, that's the win. On the
Yep.
other side of that, in between is my squat rack. On
Yep.
the other side is the Winston Churchill. Never give in. Never
Mm.
give in. Never, never, never. In nothing, great or small, large or petty, never give in, except to, right? Like
Yeah.
you just, in that sentence, captured, like, there's a reason these are the quotes that are on my
Yeah.
walls. Like, these
I
are
feel
when
it.
you said, what are your values? What are your beliefs? It's like these, and then the one that's probably over here on the floor is persistence by
Mm.
Calvin Coolidge, which
Yes.
is, nothing will ever take the place of persistence, not intelligence, not you go down the list. And those four things, we are what we repeatedly do. So just being consistent, being persistent, never giving in, and just waking up every day and getting in the arena. Those
Yeah,
four quotes are in this office because they drive who I am as a human being. Like
it's beautiful,
that,
man.
that is me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I see it, and that's why I'm seeing the man behind the timeline because I go, who is this madman? Because I know that you run a business, you have a family, you run a podcast, you have a newsletter, and somehow you just put out thread after thread after thread. And a normal person that isn't like anchored in this ideology of, showing up every single day, persistence, never giving in, force against force. Only somebody that's like deeply grounded in that kind of a worldview, a personal constitution, could do what you do. Let me ask, as someone that's been trying to figure out X for a while now, and I'm not able to dedicate to it full time. I work like a crazy person, and I'm a father, and I just recently got married as well. Um,
Congrats.
uh, Thank you, man. But I am still posting every single day. It may not be the longest or the best quality stuff. Can you give any of the aspiring Twitter writers out there your best practical advice to do what you do, to be a prolific, consistent daily writer?
Yeah, and it's interesting because it doesn't mean necessarily that it works as well now, right? Because you go through shifts in the algo. But the worst thing you could ever do is blame the algo, right? Because you have to be smart enough to understand how it's moving. So, as an example on Twitter, a lot of what gets posted to Twitter, my wife will post stuff I've written in the past or that I wrote recently and I let her run it. And every once in a while, because now I'm getting a bit more of my time back, right? I was doing this double duty of I was CFO by day while trying to grow something, while doing all of the things you're talking about. And it was just overwhelming. So I took a step back from
Respect,
Twitter.
bro. Respect.
And now tomorrow is my last day of consulting for the company I was CFO at. So after tomorrow, it will be full time my business. And so you'll see an evolution in Twitter because I never wrote on Twitter about what I did for work. CFO of a large real estate development company. Over the last 15 years, I've probably been involved in $3+ billion of residential real estate, either sold or stabilized. Stabilized being rental projects, sold being for sale condo. But I never really talk about that because I was working for someone and I felt like, hey, that's their information. But
Mhm.
but the business I'm starting is in that field. So you'll start to see me write about that all the time. And so where
Nice.
will those threads come from? I encourage people to write from lived experience
Yep.
because chat gpt you can tell who's writing from chat gpt, you could tell who's getting ai to write. But if I write about real estate and I write about, hey, if you want to be a real estate developer, here's some things you got to think about. Hey, if you want to be a real estate developer, like cash is king, let me talk to you about how I view like how I make sure you never run out of cash in a real estate development world. Like now I'm
Mm.
speaking about what I've done for
Yeah.
15 years, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
speaking from a place of lived experience. I can write it quick and I can take complexity and make it simple because that's a big part of the writing, taking
Yeah.
complex and making it simple. So if people really want to be able to be prolific, one, you have to live an interesting life, right?
Completely
Because
agree, man.
nothing's more interesting than like if all you do is go do your 9 to 5 and it's a boring 9 to 5 and you have no hobbies, you just come home and crack a brewski and watch some Netflix and then you're like, I'm gonna write some tweets and you're in your 20s, but you haven't lived anything. What are you gonna write about? Like, how are you? The only way you're gonna do it is you copy all these other people who go use AI to become a guru on something that they actually have no lived experience on,
Yeah.
right? When you read me talking about, hey, like here's the 10 things I think you need to do to become a millionaire. It's like the reason I'm listing those 10 things are when I look back on my journey to become a multimillionaire, I'm like, I think these are the 10 things that helped me the most, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't and the key is people are like, oh, well, like maybe that's not what it was. And maybe it's just that you were born that way and born rich. It's like, well, no, dude. Like I was I was in my probably 35, 32 to 35. Let's stay there. And my net worth was a few $100,000. I wasn't a good saver. I wasn't a good investor. I wasn't moving forward in my career. I was living in my head. I wasn't completing anything of significance. And it's like, here are the 10 to 20 things I changed. And after doing these 10 to 20 things, I finished a book. I
Yeah.
completed an Ironman. I ran an ultra marathon. I became a CFO. I became a multimillionaire. It's like I'm pretty sure those 10 things help. So like like so now you can write that. But it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be that. It could be like you were fat and now you're not. You were this
Hmm.
and now you're not, because a story you're writing, Shane said this in the same Sean said this in the same episode. A story is just change. So
Yes.
what in your life was going wrong and now it's going right? What was that change? And write about that.
Yeah.
The more you can center your writing on what you're passionate about, that also happens to be your lived experience. Brad Stolberg talks about ideas, and he talks about the idea that for him to really want to write about something and to write about it in a book, it's got to have three legs of a stool. It stood the test of time. So if you think about cognitive behavioral therapy, it evolved from Stoicism. That's
Hmm.
been around for thousands of years.
Yeah.
It's scientifically sound. CBT is one of the most proven methods for helping with depression and
Yeah.
other issues, right?
Peer reviewed. Yeah.
Peer review,
All that.
exactly.
Yes.
And it has to be practical. Like you have to actually be able to implement it in your life. It's like, okay, well, I read a book on thought auditing, feeling good, the new mood therapy, and implemented that. Most significant change I've ever had in my life. That's why I ever ended up finding Stoicism, was that book. Because I was like, oh my God, this just changed my life. And so you look at it, does it pass those three things? Okay, those are the things I want to write about. And I want to write about them from a place of lived experience. And then to have more writing, I want to go out and do interesting shit that I can
Yes.
bring back to the writing. So what I'm excited about now over the next 2, 3 years is I get to write about real estate. I get to write about entrepreneurship. I get to write about the intersection of self-development with entrepreneurship. Like, hey guys, here's why I think I'm a better entrepreneur, because these are the things I'm implementing from these books on how to be a better runner, how to be a better sleeper, how to I don't know, like let's
Yeah.
throw out like how to meditate better. And it's like,
Hmm.
okay, I've read that book, I've talked to that author. Here are the four things that I'm doing on a daily basis or a weekly basis. And here's how those are making me a better leader at work. And here's how they're making us make more money. Right? Like you see how you're basically taking everything that you're doing in life, and that's just circling, and it's coming into your hand.
Hmm.
Probably I like to freehand, but and you're just typing it, and you're just like and then what I would say to people is that's one thing, right? So live an interesting life and just
Yeah.
let it whirl, and then go for long walks. A lot of
Exactly.
my writing isn't even at the computer. Like when threads were banging, I was going for walks, and I'd walk for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and half of it would be no podcast, right? I'd shut off the podcast and I would just walk. And while I walked, I would write the hook. I'd be like, I've been thinking about this. Let's write a hook for that. And I would write a hook in my head, and I'd be like, oh, that's gonna bang. Like for sure that's going viral. And then I would write the titles of each tweet. I'd be like, all right, let's put 10 tweets in this hook. Right? Like, let's do it. And I would just write 10 tweets in my head. And then I would just start to flesh them out. And so I'd get home and I would just go to my laptop and
It's already written.
I could write a viral thread in under an hour. Right. And
Uh-huh.
I talk to my friends and they're like, I spent hours on this thread. And I'm like, and it was just like, I know my template. I know how it's going to look. I know the layout. I've got, and I just, boom, that walk, doing the interesting things in life, tying it all together, and then either walking or meditating, right? Like so much of my book with my sister was written either on a walk or while I meditate. Like sitting in the steam shower, meditating, and just slowly let the thoughts for the book come in. And I'd write a chapter in my head. I'd be like, boom, got the chapter. I'd get out, I'd freaking voice note or a chapter. Like that is how you write daily. Like you do cool shit all day long. You get out with your dog for a walk or your family, and then you just let it ideate. And then you come home and you put the pen to paper and boom. Like everyone's got their own way, but for me, that's when I'm really writing well.
Clint, brother. You know, Step Brothers, that moment, do we just become best friends?
That's such a good movie.
So all of my Twitter friends are going to know exactly what I'm about to say. I am a huge fan of long walks. It was literally my
Yeah.
bio. It was literally my bio. I'm known as the crazy guy that's always walking. I
Yeah.
know you're familiar with Dakota Robertson. I was in his cohort, and we would have Zoom calls, a couple Zoom calls a week. And on every Zoom call, I was walking, and I just
Yeah.
became known as the walking guy. And some of those Zoom calls would go 3 hours, and they would be like, "Nick's." It would be in the comments, "Nick's still fucking walking. What's wrong with that guy?" Right?
Yeah.
So I am this is in my weekly space. Everyone gets tired of hearing me talk about it. I'm like, go for a long silent walk. It's the number one writing hack. It's the number
For
one
sure.
thought
Totally
clarity hack.
agree.
The
Totally
number one
agree.
creative hack that
Yeah.
there is out there. I have to complain a little bit. I've had kidney stones for a couple of months, and so I
Oh,
can't. I know, so I can't walk as much, and so it's been hurting. I've had to learn other ways to sort of get into that zone. I got a surgery in 10 days. They're going to be taken out, and after I recover, I'm going to be back. But at my peak, I was doing 20,000 steps a day.
yeah,
And
that's
for
awesome.
right on. And for
Yeah.
10,000 of those steps, I was thinking about what I want to write about, what I want to do with the podcast, my future with my business and all that. And we just became best friends, bro. I could not agree more with your entire breakdown of
Yeah, just do
how
cool,
to live a
interesting
creative life.
shit and then walk. And
Yeah,
then it's
and
gonna
then
come out.
it's very affirming for me too because the only posts that I've ever done that have done really well on the timeline have been personal stories, and
Yeah.
it's not necessarily because I'm the best storyteller. It's because I live a really interesting life. My most viral post was when I proposed to my now wife. Started off at 9 months ago. I walked into a coffee shop, saw the most beautiful girl I ever seen in my life, uh, and I had to know her name. 9 months later, I'm down on one knee asking her to marry me, and she said, and then the show more button if you want to know if she said yes or no. And so that's been my most
Smooth.
viral.
Super
Right on.
smooth. I like
That's been
that.
my
That was well
my
played.
most. Thank you, bro. I had thought about the hook before I even knew if she was going to say yes or no, but luckily
Yeah.
she
Well,
said
that's the
yes.
problem, right? That's the problem with this game. I don't do it anymore, but I used to have conversations with people and I was like, ooh, that's a tweet. That's a tweet right there.
Mhm,
And I'd just be
mhm.
like writing it down or like saving it in Tweet Hunter, right? Like I'd be on a walk with someone and they'd say something and I'm like, I just got to take a second and I'd put it in Tweet Hunter. Now I don't do it as much. I just live life.
Yeah,
But when you're first learning and you're first doing it and you're first writing every single day, like you start to think in tweets. And I
absolutely, bro.
actually think it makes your thinking better because you
Absolutely.
start to think super tight, precise, and clear. And you're
Mm.
like, how do I say that as fast with as few words? And then they made this whole long form tweet and it ruined it all because it was forcing a clarity of thought that few people had. And
Yeah.
now with the long form tweets, anyone can write. But when it was
Mhm.
tweets and it was threads, you had to be able to write clearly and concisely. I missed that a little. And if you want to go
Yeah.
viral, write the exact same tweets we were a year ago and just add videos to them.
Yeah,
It's
which I've noticed.
really that simple.
one of my best Twitter friends just went viral last week. 12 million impressions on one of her posts. Sarah Larson. I'm super proud of her, and
Yeah,
that's what
okay.
she.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I interact with her a fair bit. Yeah, she's really
she's
nice.
awesome. I say all the time she's one of my
What was
favorite
that
people,
post
and
again?
it was on. She does like ner- oh my god, like kind of cognitive behavioral therapy type stuff.
Yeah,
A
I
lot of
think I
things on.
commented on that post.
Yeah, I did. I saw your comment. It was
Okay.
really
Yeah, it was
really
like
sweet.
I think it was one where I was like, yeah, I think about this a lot. I'm gonna go back and look because it was a good post.
Yeah.
It raises a point. The other one you could do is, and it's pissing me off because everyone does it, but I might just do it for fun, is you put a photo of someone famous and you're like, this is Mark Wahlberg. Mark has made $300 million and like 22 best-selling movies. I watched every interview Mark's ever done. Here are 11 lessons that will make you unfuckwithable. Right? Like, okay, I can only see that post so many times in my timeline before I'm like, okay, stop, guys, stop
Yeah,
copying each other.
it's
Right? And
hilarious.
it's just a different photo, different name, exact same 5 lines. It's like, come on, guys, come on.
That's really funny. Yeah.
So I'll do
So
that tomorrow.
there you go. I'll look out for it. I'll
Yeah.
repost it. Um,
Oh, oh, I've got an idea now. Saturday, I'm going fucking mega viral. No, tomorrow. I'm gonna do it. Well, can I do it for tomorrow? I got to write a newsletter tonight. I might do it. No, I'll do it for Saturday. Saturday, we're going viral. Watch it Saturday.
I'll be looking out for Saturday. Is this gonna be? Are you trolling here? What's going
No,
on? Okay.
no. It's gonna be fucking epic. When is this gonna get released? Should I say it? And then
I was hoping next week. Should I do it before Saturday or no?
no. Do it next week, and
No.
we'll see if it
Okay.
worked. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're
Everybody
gonna do that
go
same
check out
five
Clint on
liner.
Saturday. Yeah.
Same 5 liner. We're going to use a photo of Jeff Bezos. And I've already done a like, here's Jeff Bezos, here's his net worth, like here's the lessons. So I'll redo that with a more buff photo of Jeff. And then I'll do the same posts I've always done, which I've always done. And then for each of those posts, I'll find a video of Jeff Bezos talking about that idea. And it's going to fucking like off the
100 million
charts.
impressions. I can already see it.
Well, let me check. The last time that I wrote about the Jeff, oh, I don't have Quimax on this
I love
screen.
the idea that as you're searching that up, that people that are actually watching this podcast are now going to check what you released on Saturday and going, "Holy shit, he called it, Babe Ruth!"
Yeah,
Fucking
that's what's
pointing
gonna
out
happen.
before he
That
called the
we
shot.
want them to go back and be like, oh shit, oh shit, yeah, he said this was gonna happen and he did it,
There we
huh?
go.
Yeah, it's
Sick.
coming.
It's awesome. Right on, man. Okay, now I did say a tight hour, but time got away from us a little bit. But I
That
think
was
it was a
fun.
good thing. We were having
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, it was a
Um,
blast.
I'm gonna finish off with the my favorite question. So this is the
Okay, go.
laughing Stoic Buddha. We talked a good amount about Stoicism and mindset and even meditation. So we're gonna finish with laughing. Tell me about the first time that comes to mind that you laughed really fucking hard. That your stomach hurts, maybe tears are rolling down your face. Uh, just tell me about a time you laughed really hard.
Well, the first time would probably be, the first time I remember was when I was a kid. Back then you had to take the video out, and rewind it, or
Yep,
use,
that was
and
in the '90s. Yeah,
it must have been a weekend where I would have been about 5 years old, maybe 6. And I think we watched the very first Revenge of the Nerds 20 times over that weekend, right? And like the
classic.
nerds just being like, we want pie, we want pie, right? Like, or like, we want Bush, we want, but like, it was just like, and like, I'm like a 6-year old. I probably shouldn't even know what they mean. I probably shouldn't even be watching that scene, right? But you got like Ogre, and he's like the bad guy, but then he becomes the good guy. Like, oh, that movie to a 5 or 6-year old was the funniest thing I had ever I was 5 or 6 years old. I hadn't seen that many funny things. But Revenge of the Nerds, for sure, that would be the first one.
Bro, wifey and I are watching Revenge of the Nerds tonight. Thank you for that. You just gave me
Nice,
a gift because
nice.
I haven't watched that in over a decade, and
Right? Like,
I'm gonna be thinking about you during that
yeah,
time
yeah.
by.
Oh, such a good show. Yeah.
Awesome, bro. Right on, man. Well, thank you so much, dude. This was very fun. I felt
That
the
was fun.
dialogos. I felt the
Love
energy
it.
throughout, and you dropped some real alpha, and we had a couple of laughs. So, what more can you ask for? Clint, real quick, I often forget to do this. Let everybody know where they can find you and what they can do to connect with you.
Yeah, best spot to find us is thegrowth.guide, thegrowth.guide. And that's my personal website. So it has access to all the social medias, newsletter, podcasts, whatever they want to find. Eventually we'll have links to, Diary of a Dad. And off we go, man.
Right on, man. And best of luck with everything, all of your endeavors. I can't wait to see you talking with Elon Musk and Joe Rogan in a couple of years on
Oh,
your
that'd be crazy.
podcast.
Yeah, that'd be
And
fun.
don't forget about the little guys when you get up there. All right.
You
This
bet.
was a lot of
Never.
fun, buddy. All right.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you.
you, buddy. Catch you on the next one.
Yeah. Bye, Nick.
Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this conversation, please hit the like button. If you want to watch more podcasts like this in the future, subscribe and hit the notification to be notified when they come up. If you want to keep up with me, I am on Twitter now every day at Write with a W already. Link to that will be in the description. If you want to check out my writing, I publish a newsletter every Friday through Substack. Link to that will also be in the description. I love you guys, and let's keep doing this together. Peace.